Hi, Misha here, and some of you have asked for it. So, even though I've been putting it off for pretty much all of 2021, till I felt ready, let's talk about the French Rafale from Dassault, their current modern multirole or omnirole is a stylet fighter, and a new series in 172 scale diecast, a new company, Panzerkampf PK. And so we have two versions here. We have the single seat Rafale C and the twin seat Rafale B. Meaning the only one we're really missing is the Rafale M, but to be fair, it's pretty much the same as the C, just with a little bit of extra stuff for carriers. And if this looks a little bit like the Eurofighter, there's a very good reason for that. In fact, later we'll compare it to the Compare it to the Eurofighter. But for now, we'll talk about the very interesting history here, and then look at the features of the model and kind of give the pros and cons to the aircraft and the model itself. Here we have the Rafale C, the Hunter, meaning the fighter variant. Single seat is used by the French Air Force. And this one just came out, a month or two ago, and I finally had time to pick it up. So, to really kind of skim all the way back to the 1970s, both the French Air Force and the French Navy needed a new next-generation fighter. They had just selected the Mirage 2000, initially known as the Delta 1000, in 1975, and they were thinking, hey, what to do next? 20 years later, we're going to need the next generation. I don't know, call it a generation 4 plus or 4.5. And Dassault was kind of always at the forefront in France and really started design work in 1978 with several proposals. And by 1980, they'd kind of narrowed it down to 4 of them that they really wanted to do, 2 of which had the canards here. But they really didn't want to go it alone. So to really fast track, in 1979, they got involved with a program with Britain, Germany, the rest. This initial program fell apart in 1981. Well, in 1982, the French announced that they were doing a technology demonstrator. Now, they'd already proposed a twin-engine, single-seat or 2-seat multirole fighter, not so much looking at stealth as agility, speed, and just really to be a true jack-of-all-trades type aircraft. Air-to-air, anti-shipping, air-to-ground, close air support, strike, interdiction, heck, even reconnaissance, why not? So they said in 82, hey, we're gonna make a tech demo. But they still really wanted partners, so in 83, yet another round of cooperation of the program began with, again, West Germany, Italy, the UK, Spain, and so on. But the next year it already hit a bump when France basically wanted to take the lead. Plus, they insisted that a carrier-capable version be adopted. The problem is, only France had aircraft carriers that could use a traditional jet. Britain, well, they had the Harrier and the little escort carriers. So, in 1985, yet again, the cooperation fell apart. And in August of that year, another one was put together without France. This time, it would result 20 years later in the Eurofighter. And at first, Spain was going to not involve themselves, but eventually they got involved and France got pissy over this. But they were already producing the first demonstrator. In fact, they'd already announced a combat-capable version was coming. Well, in 85, They worked on the prototype, and in December of that year, they rolled out the initial Rafale A, with Rafale meaning a gust of wind, a zephyr, or a burst of fire in more military aggressive terms. But the A was just a tech demonstrator, really. And it was rolled out, shown off a bit, and then first took to the sky for an initial hour-long flight on July 4th, 1986. And again, France really didn't want to go it alone. Seeing that the other guys were out, they approached some other Europeans like Belgium, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands. And would it surprise you to learn that, yet again, nothing came of this? So in 1987, the French announced that, heck, they were doing it. They were going it alone. They were going to design everything, the weapons, the engines. One thing I should put out, the Rafale A, though it was meant to use a French M88 engine, just for the tech demonstrator, it was fitted with a General Electric engine, essentially copied from the FA-18 Hornet. Well, not copied, but, taken from. But actually in 1990, the tech demo plane would have one engine replaced with the French-made engine, and this allowed it to get up to Mach 1.4 without afterburner, so super cruise. Woohoo! So yeah, several times France tried to cooperate or at least have junior partners, and it didn't happen. But in 1988, Dassault was ordered to produce 5 prototypes. A contract was awarded, and they were hoping to have this in service maybe by 1996. And there were to be 3 initial versions. The Rafale C here, single seat for the Air Force. The Rafale B, a 2-seat, initially designed to be a conversion trainer. And the Rafale M for the Navy. They even hoped to do a 2-seat version for the Navy, although this never really got anywhere. So we enter into the 90s, and as of course you know, the end of the Cold War changed military budgets for everyone, everywhere. So let's put the 2-seater on the stand. Yeah, of course the budget would be cut in the early and mid-90s, but progress would go ahead. In fact, the first prototype was a Rafale C that flew in May of 1991, followed by the first prototype Rafale M that December. And these would be quite different from the A. It was a smaller aircraft, more streamlined, more composite material was used, less metal, and while it was never meant to be stealth, low visibility material was used. Things were done like the cockpit was gold tinted to reduce emissions, the inlets were reworked, and the structures, things were evened out. Yeah, they basically did what they could to minimize the radar cross-section, and they did what they could to minimize the IR signature, including the engine exhaust. Again, they never tried to be stealth. The French looked at doing a stealth, but they just didn't think the juice was worth the squeeze. Well, in 1992, in December, these are officially in full production, and initially the French Army and Navy, Air Force and Navy, planned to purchase over 330. But, they were really only in full production on paper. That said, the first Rafale B prototype would fly in April of 1993. And I think earlier I said there were 5 prototypes ordered. I think I was thinking of the Rafale A. No, there was 4 additional ones, if you don't count it. And actually the 4th prototype that was ordered, which was supposed to be another Rafale C, was canceled for budget reasons. But now the original A was still flying at this time. In fact, it would have 865 flights to its credit before it was finally retired in January of 1994. And at this time, these are still ostensibly in production, but aside from some testing, including some carrier testing in 1993 and 94 by the Navy, not much is happening. Finally, in 95, Rafale production was suspended. And it would remain so for nearly 2 years. Finally, in 1997, it was started up again. But there would be some changes. Finally, Dassault was given an ironclad agreement that the French would purchase at least 28 aircraft with an option for 20 more. And this, because of all the delays and cuts and much smaller number, plus all the facts that everything in this aircraft was developed inside France, meant the cost was going up. But it was not going up as crazy as, say, with the F-35 or the Eurofighter, at least. So, okay, they're going to put them into production. They're going to have the B, the C, and the M. And the planned deliveries are to occur between 2002 and 2007. Now, one interesting thing happened. France flew Mirages during the 1991 Gulf War. And originally they wanted the B, the two-seater. It's just a conversion trainer. But they realized that having a two-seat was not bad at all. Having the second crewman took a lot of workload off to the front guy. And it meant that this could do, for example, it didn't need to have protection. It could do basically its own seed roll. It could do better air-to-ground targeting. So the Air Force changed its mind. It actually went to a 60-40 split, with the majority, 60%, being the two-seat B model. Meaning that, fewer C's were actually ordered. Kind of funny. The order was expanded in 2004 and again in 2009. And at that point, between the Air Force and the Navy, 180 Rafales were on order and or had been delivered. So, okay, not 330, but a lot better than 28. And it would start to be delivered, and since they had need of it, the Navy would get first crack at the M. But this aircraft would actually replace quite a few. In the Air Force, it would let them retire the old Mirage F1, the Mirage 2000C, the Mirage 2000D, eventually the Mirage 2000N, the Mirage 2005F, although they're still flying. But more importantly to the Navy, it finally let them get rid of their old F-8 Crusaders, so Vietnam-era aircraft. Now, they did consider adopting the FA-18 Hornet, even getting some test models from the U.S. and Australia, but for whatever reason, they decided that it wasn't suited for their carrier operations. They really needed the M, so they kind of got first crack at it. But the Air Force would not be so far behind. And, the story here kind of does seem a lot like with the Eurofighter and F-35. The post-Cold War budget cuts really hit hard. So with that, even though it took a long time, what did France end up with? Was the aircraft worth a damn? So this was designed with an advanced glass cockpit, very highly digital, even had voice commands, although not for launching the missiles. That was still left for a button press, just in case. Heck, the voice commands are even bilingual, English and French. It has a total of 14 hard points, 13 on the naval version, although only 5 are really rated for heavy ordnance. The rest are either for pods or small, short-range missiles like the Magic 2. It can carry up to 9,500 kilograms, air-to-air, air-to-surface, anti-shipping. It carries a targeting pod as a standard feature, which is heavily integrated into the navigation attacks and all those systems. And it's a very modular design, meant to be upgradable, easy peasy. And as you see, it has 2 engines with fixed intakes. Like I said, the exhausts are treated to give a small signature. And, 2 is always good for redundancy as well. And the B and the C are very close in terms of capability, because ultimately the B was decided to be a strike aircraft in and of itself, with the C is more of a fighter interceptor variant. And they can carry the same things. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it, but really maybe the most impressive is that it's pretty much entirely designed and made in France, in fact in Bordeaux. Only a few minor components, according to France, are imported from the USA. The engines, the weapons, it's all made in France. Also has an onboard oxygen generation system. Of course, it's GPS compatible. Hands-on controls, all the stuff you'd expect. A 0-0 ejection seat, which is a copy of the Martin Baker license copy. And has ability for aerial refueling, advanced electronic countermeasures, chaff and flare, jamming. I think you get the idea. And of course we have these moving canards here. It's actually a very agile plane, and it can take quite a G load. It's rated up to 9.5 standard, but in emergencies can take up to 11 Gs, although no guarantees on your pilot. And much like with the Eurofighter, it was delivered in trenches, although they call them F for France. The F1 series, the initial series, had air-to-air capabilities only, so it was a defense fighter. The F2 series, which was introduced a few years after, had the air-to-ground abilities, and the F3 series first introduced reconnaissance abilities and the ability to carry a nuclear weapon. That was around in 2008. And then, in 2010, when France announced they were going to be adopting the Meteor long-range, beyond visual range, anti-aircraft missile, this would ultimately lead to the F4 generation to handle the Meteor, as well as other modern ordnance, and there would be some other updates. For example, originally it had a passive radar. Later this was changed to a much more effective active scan, active array radar, first appearing in 2012 for the Air Force and 2013 for the Navy. And there would be some other things. But, if this sounds a lot like the Eurofighter, you're not wrong. In fact, they have a lot in common. So let's do a little comparison. So I grabbed one of my Hobby Master 172 Eurofighters. I've covered this aircraft in several videos, you can check that out. But just could not do some comparison without it. Interestingly, both have just about the same wingspan, just under 36 feet. The Rafale is slightly smaller. Lengthwise, again, very similar. The Eurofighter is about 52 feet. The Rafale is just under 51 feet. So very, very similar. As far as speed, both are capable of supercruise. The Eurofighter is rated at about Mach 1.5. The Rafale about Mach 1.4. So a little bit of an edge to the Eurofighter. At altitude, the Eurofighter can get up to Mach 2. At least that's what it's rated at. The Rafale is rated at Mach 1.8. So again, just a little bit difference. Likewise, at sea level, the Rafale is rated about Mach 1.1, and the Eurofighter is about Mach 1.2 to 1.3. Both can carry external fuel tanks, including these big honking ones on the Rafale. Both are capable of aerial refueling. Heck, both even use the same Meteor missiles or Mica missiles, or even could use the Magic, which is essentially the French take on the Sidewinder. Yeah, you get the idea. Very similar. The one area, the Rafale has a little bit of an edge with the carriage. It can carry 9,000 500 kilograms, whereas the Eurofighter, about 9,000. The Eurofighter has 13 hard points. Like I said, the Rafale has 14, except for the naval version, which has 13. And both have a cannon. The Eurofighter has a 27mm Mauser cannon with 150 shells, while the Rafale has a 30mm, a little bit bigger cannon, and with 125 shells. So, fewer shots, but a little bit bigger. So, take it. Both have canards. Both have 2 engines. One thing to point out, the Rafale often mounts air-to-air missiles on the wingtips, whereas the Eurofighter often mounts pods there and other sensors. And both are multi-role, but ironically again, the Tranche 1 and the F-1s were only air-to-air aircraft. One other thing, I think the Rafales maybe just a little bit cheaper, but they're both, of the same design period, and you can tell that they had collaborated to some extent in the early design process. And neither one is really focusing on stealth. And both have gained more air-to-ground capabilities as time has gone on. And both have seen military service over the past 20 years. So let's talk about that for a minute. Okay, it's me, so more than a minute. Let's change things up and take her off the stand here, the C model. But this can fill in for the M model. In fact, the M model and the C model are about 95% parts compatible. And the M doesn't even have folding wings because it's relatively small diameter, and the fact that the Charles de Gaulle carrier is relatively big. It just had a reinforced undercarriage, landing carriage, and tail hook, which this one actually does have 2, which can be useful for short fields. I did leave the little plastic on the stand. It just plugs in really tight, so I just like to leave it on. This is kind of in a long-range Syrian or Libyan configuration here. Anywho, since the Navy had the need, the first 2 production models were delivered to them in late 2000. And then in 2001, they would be given the 6th production model. These were F-1s. And this would let the first squadron form and begin training up. And in 2002, they kind of set it into a field test, flying them over Afghanistan. Since these didn't have ground attack abilities, they were just there for air support. Well, I shouldn't say air support, sorry, escort and observation, and just to test the aircraft out in the skies. They would keep training up in carrier operations and would be declared ready in June of 2004, and they would continue to acquire them for some time. Again, then the 2-seat naval version was canceled, so they just had the single-seater here. And the Air Force would continue to train up. They would get their first ones as well. They would train in 2004 and 2005, and they would declare the first initial operational readiness in June of 2006. But what was good for them, this was also when the F-2s were becoming available, so they kind of got to skip that. In one of their first tests, they would send them over to Afghanistan, 3 of them, beginning operations there in March of 2007, and they would deliver bombs. And they would kind of swap in and out with some Mirage 2005Fs that year, kind of going in, being evaluated, coming back, and proved quite effective and operationally available. In fact, between 2009 and 2011, at least 3 Rafales were on station at Kandahar to just, support Allied troops on the ground. They provided close air support. They also were sent on reconnaissance missions. And then in 2011, they would fly in support of Operation Odyssey Dawn over Libya, doing strike and reconnaissance missions. And the first ones would be sent to West Africa, Mali, 2013, kind of branching things out a bit. And the first ones would be sent to Iraq to do overflights, originally reconnaissance in 2014, and later strike missions. And these would continue hitting Islamic State targets in 2016. And like I said, this one here, I kind of prefer it because it's more of the military one, and it is in the standard long-range strike air-to-air. We have 4 air-to-air missiles. I'm not sure if these are Mica or Meteor. I presume Mica. They're quite similar. And then we have 2 large air-to-surface missiles, bombs here, and then 2 very large long-range fuel tanks. And this was pretty much the loadout. There's more spots under the fuselage, even on the model here. You couldn't mount stuff, but you know, for weight and all that, this is quite enough. As for the model itself, these Panzer Comps, the good, they do have gear up or down. They do have ordnance and tanks that plug in, and they plug in quite well. The stand plugs in quite well, as you see. And we do have an opening canopy. I threw a little Hobby Master guy in there, so if he's sitting a little weird, sorry about that. I just threw him in there. They don't come with the pilot, but they do have opening canopies. And they do come with a metal stand. It's not bad. So that's the good. The bad is that it's kind of a lightweight metal, but then again, this is a lightweight plane. Like these canards are pretty thin, but again, on the real aircraft, they're thin, and they do move. But it has more of a, again, it is metal feeling, but it's a thinner type metal, or maybe it's just more of a lightweight alloy metal, or a tail vertical is plastic. But our wing is all metal, body's all metal, and again, even our, I think our canary, that might be plastic, either plastic or thin metal, hard to say. So it's not the fact of lack of metal content, this feels a little bit light, all in all. But still a lot heavier than a plastic model, that's for sure. And since no one else is doing Rafales, not only are they doing them, they're doing several versions. And again, they come with optional ordnance and several places to plug them in, so you can kind of set them up in different ways. Again, there's all the holes here, there's of course under here. So all the hard points are represented. So all in all, I'm not disappointed. These are priced kind of like a Corgi. We'll see how they do and how some of their other aircraft they end up doing. Oh, by the way, I'm sure you saw it, but we do have the targeting pod here. Originally, the pods the Rafales came with were a little bit, they were, you know, designed in France. That doesn't mean anything bad, but since they were domestic, they were kind of considered maybe not as good as Western pods from America, Britain, but they have made good strides over the last 10 years in upgrading these, along with the radar, like I said. And the latest F4 generation really does have some major improvements. So hopefully I got something on camera to show you here. It is a cool aircraft. And I do like this C here because of the ordnance it comes with. But that's not to say I don't like the B, the one I first got. Now let's take the two-seater off the stand. Like I said, I've had this one for a while, but I was kind of waiting until I had both to show you. And I have this one in a true air-to-air configuration with 6 missiles, just kind of the maximum. And it has fuel tanks, but these are of the smaller type. Again, it has 14 hard points, just like the single-seater. And in fact, that's what the French Air Force first received, were 3 B models in 2004 when they were training up the The Navy first put theirs on a cruise in 2002 on Charles de Gaulle, more for testing than anything else. But one interesting fact about the Rafale, the M version is one of the handful of aircraft in the world that's operational on U.S. carriers. It can land and whatnot. But not really surprising considering how much they put into it, and France is one of the few other nations that still operates carriers in the world. Although Britain seems like they might be getting back into the game, which good on them. But like I said, they started operating in Afghanistan and then Libya. Actually, Operation Odyssey Dawn was really good for the Rafale. It proved itself for good for long endurance missions, but it did showcase a few shortcomings, and so they were able to do a round of updates in 2012 and 13, including with the comms gear and some of the other stuff. Pilots also preferred using GPS guided bombs as opposed to other types like, say, laser. Yeah, whatever they felt comfortable with. But proved itself quite well. And the F3 generation, by the way, the older F1s and F2s were updated to F3 eventually. And after the adoption of the Meteor, that meant the F4 was coming online. And it's kind of where we're at now. In 2018, France would deploy 5 or 6 of these to Syria. They would operate strike and reconnaissance there, again performing quite well. And in that same year, the Navy would actually send 12 of theirs to live on the USS George H. Bush, along with their support crews. And Dassault has found some export customers for these. Not as many as they'd hoped, but production is up to nearly 240 at this point. So, yeah, not doing too shabby, all things considered, frankly. And the French Navy and Air Force plan to keep this as their frontline fighter, interceptor, fighter bomber until at least 2040. And probably in a secondary role after that. I mean, they put so much effort into it, they're not going to quickly abandon it. And it does seem to be doing well for them. French aircraft like this, they're advanced, but also they have a certain simplicity. Sorry, my cockpit's coming off. And the Rafale's no different. This was the first version that Panzerkampf came out with, the B. And as you see, it's quite similar to the C, just like the 2-seat Eurofighter is very, very similar externally to the single seat. It's all just how you design stuff. Again, these canards do move. And that, folks, is the Rafale. What do you think? I'm certainly glad a company finally did these. One neat thing I'll point out, the way the PK does these, they kind of have a universal slot system, either 2 or 1 hole, meaning weapons from one model can easily be plugged into another. If they continue to have a series, that might not be a bad thing to have. With that, let's wrap things up. Well, I hope this was fun. It was finally good to finally address the Rafale. And next time, coming in reverse history, we're going to look at another Panzerkampf and a more legendary aircraft, the Mirage 2000, specifically the B. And we will also compare it with the Mirage 2000 from Hobbymaster. But for now, I think we've done enough on the Rafale. It is really neat that they did this all their own. Like I said, these are essentially 90 some odd percent built in France, at least the components, and they're definitely all assembled in France. And while they definitely have sought out export customers, they did it alone, which is quite remarkable in the 21st century. And it's a perfectly good omnirole, as Dassault calls it, aircraft. And while I don't think Panzerkampf will be my favorite, if they continue to do more obscure aircraft like this, I'll continue to buy them. I think they're fine. I wouldn't probably knock one off a shelf. I'm not sure how durable they would be. Maybe I'm wrong. But again, the metal does feel like it's either thinner or just more of a lightweight alloy. But the Mirage over here is a little heavier, actually. Actually, by quite a bit. So it could just be the Rafale design being a relatively slim and trim little plane. Anywho, we'll see. So let me know what you think, and if you've also picked up a Panzerkampf, let me know how it turned out for you. As always, I greatly appreciate you tuning in, and if you could, please like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon.